Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that he thinks I look ordinary, so. Yeah, before I get started, I just want to thank Tabor and Ryan for allowing me to come here and share what God's done for me this past year and share his goodness, his grace, and I just pray that his glory is shown through my story. Like he said, I have a beautiful wife, Ashley, and 3 kids. Graysen is a first grader, and he's skipping school to be here for me, so thanks, bud. And Kinley's 5, and Sage is 2. So I just love this picture. It was taken the night before one of my surgeries, and I just love the joy and the smiles that are on everybody's face. You know, we were going through a difficult time, but yet God was there, and he gave us the joy to get through it. So just a little bit about myself. Like Ryan said, I grew up here in Hillsboro on a family farm just north of town, and I went to college at Mid-America Nazarene University for 2 years, and then finished my degree in mechanical engineering at Kansas State. And so being at Mid-America, we had chapel, so I know what this is kind of like. All you guys in the back, no sleeping. I know how that works. So, so currently we live and work on the family farm, and just north town, grow small grains like Ryan said. So. Has anybody ever been in an accident or had a life-changing event where, 1 minute your life is normal and the next it's totally flipped upside down? 1 minute you're thinking of what you're going to do later that day, what you're going to do next week, next year, or 50 years from now. And then the next minute you're wondering if you're going to survive. Real quick in your head you think, what happens next? And then a question that you think is forever away, what happens when I die, suddenly is staring you right in the face. This is something that I experienced last year. And I've always heard people that have these life-changing events say, your perspective in life changes. And I'm here to tell you that that's true. 5 years from now, it's hard to think about 5 years from now or 20 years from now when we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And when you experience the realness of that, I promise you, it does. It changes everything. And so, I'm going to be honest today. This is something that it's hard for me to talk about, not because it's hard for me to share what God's done for me or hard for me to want to explain the goodness of God, but it's hard because it was a humbling experience for me personally. With the encouragement of the Apostle Paul, I too will boast about my weakness. If you turn to the next slide, 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10 says, "But he said to me," this is the Lord talking to Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." This is a passage when Paul's, he's crying out to God. He's pleading with him to get rid of a thorn that's in his flesh. The Bible says it's a messenger from Satan. So, Paul's dealing with something, whether it was something affecting his ministry or a physical thorn. There was something there that he was asking God to get rid of, and God didn't. He didn't get rid of it. Instead, he used it to show Paul that when he humbles himself and when he fully relies on God, that's when he actually has that strength. So September 18th, 2018 helped me really understand this verse. I'm the type of person who likes to do things in my control. I don't like relying on other people, and I just feel more comfortable if I'm in control. It was a beautiful morning, and my father and I were harvesting corn, and we were just enjoying the day. It was we were just thanking God for a harvest. As a farmer, you have to thank God for everything that you get. Everything is from Him. My wife Ashley had made lunch for me and him and a few others that were helping us. And so the plan was for me to go home, get the lunch, and then bring it back to the field. But on the way, I decided that I was going to start an irrigation pivot. The next slide has a picture of an irrigation pivot, and it was actually taken the morning of my accident. My wife Ashley was out for an early morning run, and she just thought the sunrise and the pivot, the water was just beautiful, so she took it. And little did she know that in a few hours, the thing that she thought was so beautiful was going to change her life forever. So what we use irrigation pivots for, if you don't know, it's basically just a big sprinkler. It goes round and round, and it waters our crops. You know, I can remember driving down the road towards the pivot to turn it on, but really that's the last thing that I remembered, that I can remember before I started to be electrocuted by 480 volts. It's interesting because as soon as I started to be electrocuted, I can vividly remember everything that I was thinking and hearing and feeling. It was just this loud hum, and my teeth hurt. What happens is your body, your muscles tense up, and I can remember just the feeling that I just felt like my neck was really tight, and I was just looking up, and I couldn't move. I remember thinking, how could this be happening? I knew what kind of voltage that was. I knew what probably was going to happen. You see, when that much current is going through your arm or your body, your muscles tense up, like I said, and your flexion muscles are stronger than your tension muscles, and so you're unable to release and to let go. So by my own strength, I could not let go of that wire. I remember praying for Ashley and the kids. I thought, this was over, and so I just was praying to God to take care of them, to be there with them. I remember thinking, how long can I withstand this pain? How long can I, before I pass out or pass away? But I very vividly remember my last thought, and it was me crying out to God, help me, God. And that's when I blacked out. So as I look back at that verse I read earlier, and it says, for my power is made perfect in weakness. That's where I was. That was my situation. I was weak. I couldn't pull off the wire. But as I humbled myself and cried out to God, he was there for me. The strength that the Lord can provide if we humble ourselves and ask for it is amazing. When we are weak and when we can't do things on our own, that's when God's grace can really shine through. Numerous doctors told me that I shouldn't be here. They told me that I shouldn't have been able to get away from the wire. And so a few weeks after I had gotten home, I was pondering all these things, trying to understand how I did get off the wire. And I called one of my surgeons, and he told me something. He said, Dustin, there's some things that you can't explain. He told me that I had bruises on my bicep and my shoulder. And he said, I truly believe those are from the hand of God pulling you off that wire. And so this was from a surgeon who works in the burn unit, who sees lots of electrical injuries, and he's been around it a lot. And so hearing that from him just gave me a lot of confidence in what I really believed, and that was that God had saved me. I can't tell you how many people since then have told me, oh, man, you're lucky. And my response to that is, no, I don't feel lucky. I feel blessed. And part of me wants to just look at them and say, luck? If you want to put your faith in luck, go ahead. I believe in Jesus. And so when a miraculous thing like this happens, to me, that's not luck. And God promises that in Psalms 46:1, the next verse. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. He promises to be with us and to be our strength if we let him. So when I finally woke up, we figured I was unconscious for about 20 minutes. When I came to, I was a few feet away from where it happened, and I was actually propped up against a post. My head was slouched down, and my phone was ringing. It was Ashley calling because I had never showed up for lunch. And so I answered it, and I told her, hey, I'm burnt. I need you to come and get me. And so then she must have called my father, who was only a half mile away. She was probably about 4 miles from me. And so the next thing I remember is I see him driving the tractor. That's all he had. He was driving the tractor towards me. And I remember he stopped about 100 yards away in the middle of the road, and he gets out, and he starts running towards me, which I guess he figured he could run faster than the tractor was going. But when he finally got to me, he said there was just this peace about me, and that he could just sense that God's presence was there. And I had that peace through this whole experience. I always thought that it was probably because I was just in awe that God had spared my life. I thought I was dead. I still have a picture in my head of while I was being electrocuted, picturing myself lying in the field and somebody walking up to me, because that's what I thought was going to happen. Ashley got there soon after he did, and they put me in a pickup, and she drove me to the hospital. And she said the whole time I was just thanking God, just shouting out and thanking him, but also at the same time pleading with him to continue to save me. The surgeon said that the first thing I told him when he met me was, I may lose 2 fingers, but God's got me. And I truly had that confidence and that peace through this whole time. So as I think back to seeing my father running towards me after getting out of the tractor, I know how much he loves me. I know how much he wishes he would have been there to save me. But the fact is, he wasn't there. And even if he was, if he would have touched me or tried to pull me away, he would have been electrocuted. And so, it probably was good he wasn't. So there's nothing that he could have done to save me. But we have a Heavenly Father who's always with us, who's there no matter what, and he has the power to save us, no matter what the voltage is. I also know that God protected me from, he protected my heart and internal organs from this shock. The electricity entered my body through my index finger, which I'd point to, but it's not there. And it exited my thumb, my wrist, or right below my wrist, and then on my chest, right above my heart. I'm going to pause here a second so you can picture that. If you've ever plugged something in or slowly maybe unplugged something into an electrical socket, you see a small little arc, a small little flash. Think about that coming magnified by 10 times, coming out of my chest, right above my heart. God is amazing. And I'm sorry if this grosses anybody out, but I have to share this to explain how bad it was. My index finger was half gone, just burnt. Half of it was gone. The only thing left really was the top and my fingernail. The tip of my thumb was the same way, just half of it was gone. When I woke up and I'd seen my hand, looked down and saw it, I knew how bad it was, and I hadn't even seen where the electricity exited. I didn't even know that there was a hole in my wrist, or that there was a hole in my chest right above my heart. And speaking of that, to me, it's just so unbelievable about where the electricity exited. You see, electricity has to have a path to a ground. So once it's in your body, it's really unexplainable about where it goes. Typically it would exit your feet or your other hand or something else touching the metal or the ground. And I'm pretty sure that I was kneeling on the ground because what I was working on is a little lower to the ground, and I'm pretty sure as I think back that I was kneeling. And so the fact that it didn't exit my knees and instead came out my chest is amazing to me. We looked at the box. There was no marks on it from what would look like if electricity had arc to it. And so it's just amazing to me of how it exited my body. The doctor said that because of where it exited and how it probably traveled through my body, it probably went through my heart. And when I got to the hospital, my heart had a very irregular rhythm, and they were very concerned about it. But actually, after that first night after my surgery, it converted back to a normal rhythm. And the doctor, I asked him about that, and he said that's normal. It's normal for it to convert back. He said usually it takes a few days, but God was there for me in that way as well. They were also monitoring a lot of my other internal organs. Kidneys is one, for example, that when that electricity is going through your body, it burns tissue, and as your body tries to get rid of that, kidneys are one way that it does get rid of it. And so I don't have any lingering complications in my kidneys because of that, and I just view that as just another way of God protecting me. So as my internal organs stabilized, I still had skin grafts. I had skin grafts on my hand and my wrist and my chest that were still happening to heal. And the crazy thing about electricity is that your injury doesn't show up right away. It's basically burning you from the inside out. And so throughout that whole first week, I kept having surgeries, and they kept having to remove more and more of my hand. And because things kept, the tissue was it was dying. It would just show up, and it was dying. And so eventually they had to remove all of my thumb, all of my index finger, and my middle finger. Half of it had a skin graft that we were just waiting on to see if it would take and if it would heal. Well, as time went on, my finger the skin was just getting blacker and blacker, and it wasn't taking. And so we went to see 2 more hand specialists and to get their opinion, and both of them looked at it and were just like, it doesn't look good, it looks like it's dead and probably not salvageable. They said, even if we could take the old graft off, put a new one on, your finger would probably just be a post. You wouldn't be able to use it. And so, I know it's just one finger. I'd already lost 2. It's just one finger, but I remember when I left that last doctor, I was just devastated, because I just felt like with 3, I could do a lot more than with just 2. But, even though it looked that bad, the doctor agreed. He's like, okay, we'll take off the failed skin graft and see what it looks like. And so, I went in for surgery. He took it off, and, afterwards he was actually slightly encouraged, but he said there is still a lot of tissue that doesn't look very good, so they put what they call a wound vac on. And basically that's just it's kind of like a vacuum. It's just supposed to help promote blood flow to the tissue to create a good tissue bed for my next skin graft. And so I had that on. The plan was a week later to go in for surgery. Well, I had tons of problems with that wound vac, and so the day before, we actually went in to get it taken off, and I'll never forget, as they pulled my wound dressing off my finger, blood just poured out, which is what we were wanting. And it was red, healthy tissue, and just another answer to prayer. And so the next day, they put a new graft on, and it took, and over the next, 3-4 months, I regained probably 95% of use of my finger. And so, this is just another example of God's goodness to me. I know that there was a lot of people that were praying for me, and I know that there's a lot of power in prayer. And, every time this doctor would have a surgery or do something, things were better than he expected. And I give God all the credit for that and the many prayers that were said on my behalf. So as I told you earlier, my degree's in mechanical engineering, and so by nature, I've had this desire to understand what happened that day. And I think part of it is just being curious, but I think the other part is, I want to be able to prove that God saved me. I've felt that need to prove that God saved me, especially when I'm standing in front of you and sharing my story. So, I guess it's just because I want everybody else to believe what I believe. I want everyone to know the one true God. And so I've done a lot of research, reached out to former professors of mine, thought about this a lot, of how the electricity went through my body. And so I have a chart here, hey, good job, that kind of explains the probable effect on the human body. So the categories are in the current, and so to find the current of what was going through my body, you have to know the voltage and the resistance of what my body had in that circuit. And so, I know it was 480 volts, but my problem is I don't know what the resistance of my body was. Our skin is what protects us from electricity, and so the skin is how you would find the resistance of your body. But the problem is there's a lot of different things that affect that. And skin conditions, like whether your skin is wet or dry, has a huge impact on it. Whether you have a cut or something for the electricity to pass through if your skin's already broke, also has an impact on it as well. And these effects are just only if you are attached for 1 second. So the longer that you have the current flowing through your body, the more damage it can cause as well. So I say all this simply to explain that I have no way of knowing what category I was in. I have no way of telling what the current was that was going through my body. All I can do is look at the results of what my accident left me. So, for example, let's look at the 17 to 99 milliamps. The effects are extreme pain, respiratory arrest, severe muscular contractions, and the individual cannot let go. Death is possible. I definitely had a number of these effects. When I was in the hospital, I had scratches all over my body. I had scratches on my head. My muscles had contracted, and once I had finally gotten off the wire, I'm sure that I was on the ground thrashing around. So that I definitely could have been in that range. Let's look at the next line, 100 to 2,000 milliamps. Possible effects are ventricle fibrillation, uneven, uncoordinated pumping of the heart. Muscular contraction, nerve damage begins. Death is likely. I was told that at some point I had a rare heart rhythm called torsades, which they said can degenerate into ventricular fibrillation. So it's possible that the current was even over 100 milliamps. I'll never know these values, so I can't stand here and say, I had 100 milliamps for 5 seconds, so, I should have been dead. I won't ever know exactly what happened, but what I do know is that I was attached long enough to burn half of 2 of my fingers off, put a hole in my forearm and my chest, and mess up my heart rhythm bad enough that they had to fly me to the nearest burn unit. And yet, by God's grace, I'm standing here sharing this story with you today. I don't have to scientifically prove to you to find the proof. Me standing here today is the proof. I've realized that me telling you this story isn't going to save you. It isn't going to even prove God's existence to anyone who doesn't already believe. But to me, the faith that I have, that God saved me, is the faith that he talks about in Hebrews 11:1. If you could put that up for me. It says, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. You see, I believe that God saved me. And even though I didn't see it or know exactly how it happened, I have that assurance that he did. I pray for each one of you today that you will have this faith, if not today, but someday, because this is the faith that saves your life. It doesn't save it not necessarily from accidents, but it saves you from eternally living apart from God. And I pray that you don't waste time finding this faith. I didn't wake up that day thinking it could be my last, but it very well could have been. So please don't wait. Find your faith in Christ, because he is the reason that we can have hope in these hard times. He's the reason that we can have comfort in these hard times. And like Paul said, he's the reason that we can actually delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, and persecutions and difficulties. Without Christ in your life, your hope will fade during these difficult times. But with him, these times of weaknesses can be turned into times of strength. So if anybody would like to talk to me more about my story or having faith in Jesus Christ, I would love to talk with you afterwards or some other time. But thank you so much for letting me share my story and how God has worked in my life this last year. Thank you.